database, EBS applications, engineered systems, cloud technologies. So I've prepared this particular presentation with the mindset that, okay, participants have got some challenges with EBS and how the cloud, a simple mechanism to alleviate some of those challenges. And also I have covered quite extensively around the gotchas when you try to look at adopting cloud strategy for EBS environments. Okay, so um, I hope we could start, Mary, now the presentation, and I hope everybody can see my screen.
I think so, Ranga. So why don't we just jump into it, and we'll just ask everybody to hold their questions until the end. However, if there is a question along the way, please feel free to use the chat box that's available so that we can see it, and Ranga and myself will try to answer or pause to answer whatever question there is.
Uh,
Yeah.
all right. So standard is primarily for education purpose. Every customer environment is unique. Every customer use case is unique. Now let's try to absorb the information that is in there and then see how we can tailor it. Okay. Also, I'm a big rugby fan, especially with the Rugby World Cup nearing to the final stages. My favorite team is in the final semifinals playing against the old nemesis, the Palms. So go the All Blacks. All right. Let's quickly walk through the agenda. Right. Why should we consider Oracle e-business? Why should we consider Oracle cloud infrastructure for it? Okay. Some of the key notes much available from my Oracle support on EBS 12.2 and some of the automation tools that are available to look at comparisons and from an existing version to a 12.2, what will change so you can have understanding. So we will walk through that. And there are two ways we're going to talk about deploying services in a cloud environment. I'm saying in a cloud, with respect to whether it is Oracle or Google or Amazon. One is called an inside-out architecture. The other one is called outside-in architecture. We will talk about the key differentiators between, right? And before we go say that, okay, we understand the cloud, but where to begin? How do I start moving to my cloud environment? I'm 100% sure most of you organization or somewhere have got a cloud presence, but like typically from EBS perspective, where do we begin? So that's what I'm going to cover. And the next 2 points about authentication, authorization with cloud services is primarily to look at how secure my environment in the cloud is going to be. What are the options that are available out of the box as a service that I could use to restrict unwanted, unauthorized accesses. Okay, and the last where Centroid can help, especially myself, right? So let's proceed. Okay. I should be look at Oracle EBS and OCI, right? So some of us might fall into the camp saying I'm deploying EBS, a new version, and I want to know what it means. I don't have big infrastructure. I don't have the right services in terms of networks, disk storage, etc. So I want to go for cloud. That's one option. The other option is the customer say I'm already on the cloud, but I want to move off my data center business. I want to move to cloud, and I want to know how I could start integrating my different public cloud providers. That's one option. And some customers might, I want to limit my licensing, right? So, or a customer might say, I'm in the middle of being audited. I want to make sure that I stick to the licensing policy. That's another option why customer choose. I mean, obviously, talking about reducing costs, which is the last item. For me, reducing CapEx might be the driving factor, but how effectively we migrate to cloud is the success factor for that, right? And running Oracle EBS in OCI, it gives us a single vendor support. So the applications are certified to run on certain platform. The database is certified to run on certain platform and versions. and you're going to get a single support for it. You don't have to report, I mean, especially during open world. Now Oracle recognizes workloads on VMware, so it challenge is removed. But just in case that if I have everything managed, hosted by Oracle for your applications, you don't have to move around between your application support team versus your infrastructure support team. So these are some of the critical things that we need to keep in mind, and some customers might fall into more than one bucket, but there is a standard approach that we can follow before we adopt EBS and OCI. Most of you would know, have or probably have read about migrating to Oracle 12.2 EBS. Some of the critical notes that are available: the data model comparison, file comparison, and the technology stack comparison. Right? Each one of them, when you run that report, it's a zip file that you run. It creates a nice HTML document for you, wherein you can start looking at what are the changes that my environment is going to have if I move to EBS 12.2. And accordingly, it gives you a good planning session to say that, okay, if my database size is going to increase, or if my database components is going to change, how is it going to impact my customization workflows, etc. So it's very critical, right, that we always run this. This is a tool developed by support. So the, the readable format is HTML. It's a web page, and it's very easy for us to plan, especially the EBS and the DBAs as well. Now, before we go into that architecture, right, does everybody understand that, like, some of us maintain just the EBS stack, some of us maintain just the database stack, some could be responsible for the infrastructure, but we always rely on others, members of our organization, like your network admins, your security admins, your storage admins, etc. Right? Inside out architecture, that means is to be deploying services on a cloud, but the network layer is going to be, I'm going to trust the network layer that I'm going to be deploying on the cloud, right? And you establish a connection from your on-prem to your cloud using some kind of a tunneling or some kind of a MPLS connection to your services. That means what happens is a customer or a user from your office premises, when he is talking to a cloud service, he doesn't know that the service is running on a cloud provider A or a cloud provider B. Right? He just accesses it as though that service is part of his corporate network. That's number one. But some of the overheads, challenges of that kind of an architecture is you are trusting everybody in your organization. So if a third party vendor comes in and you leave your laptop open, then he can pretty much the cloud provider if he is smart, or he could just install a bot that goes and siphons all the information. I want to have some kind of encryption. I want to have some kind of HA architecture for activity. So it's an additional cost that you have to incur to set that up as well. So you look at the. Can you please go on mute if you guys are not talking, please? I'm getting some background. Sorry. Okay. Thank you. All right. And the other thing that we talk about is the critical factor is zero trust. Awesome. Okay. Meaning, if a user, as I said, logs into your corporate guest network, and for some reason, if from that network you are allowing access to your services on the cloud via your firewall, you're pretty much keeping it open. So it's very possible that some of the attacks, like man in the middle or acting as a corporate user, you're exposing cloud services. These are some of the disadvantages and advantages of inside-out architecture. It doesn't mean to say that we should not take this approach. If we adopt the inside-out architecture, then you have to have a better mechanism to control your authentication and The other way of looking at this is what we call it as an architecture. That is, I'm not going to trust anybody. Every user declare himself, or any services has to declare himself that I could trust. Now, this might have multi-factor authentication services, might come as on an SSL port, right? And I'm not even going to trust a machine that is sitting right next to it. So an application server may not be trusted to the database tier, and likewise, a database tier might not be trusted to an application tier. So in that architecture, the initial setup and allowing policies, managing the policies becomes cumbersome, but meeting the requirement of your InfoSec requirements, right? And when you're trying your EBS endpoint URL from either say on-prem or through a VPN or exposing your EBS URL to the outside world, you can have a better mechanism of not exposing your EBS URL directly, but you can always go through a firewall that can mask your URL so nobody will know where that URL is being serviced from. These are some of the advantages of moving an outside-in architecture, but a lot more planning needs to go. Right? From the EBS angle, migrating from version A to version B and moving from on-prem to a cloud raises these challenges. We have all had part of EBS upgrades prior to 12.2, like from 12.1 to 12.1, whatever. We know the challenges, but the moment I'm taking it off my on-prem network and moving it into the cloud, we have to start thinking along these lines. And Oracle Cloud Infrastructure offers some of the uh, services that we can subscribe at no cost that will eliminate these challenges and it makes your environment more secure. Right? We will definitely walk through some of the challenges and how it's being done. Now, where do I begin? How does my EBS environment is going to look different in me running it on-prem was right? So we spoke about the single vendor use case. Right? In Oracle EBS application component, a database component, and I might have some kind of a web application service or an Apex application service sitting on the cloud. When you spin these services on Oracle Cloud, Oracle maintains, supports, and authorizes the version that you are running, and it's compatible with application component A versus application component. So therefore, it's the same EBS that you're running, and you're running it on an infrastructure that by them, so they want it, and it gives you the option of customizing it by adding additional services to it. That's one way of looking into it. The other way of looking is sometimes an EBS customer might think, I like to have the flexibility of a cloud. I don't want to put I don't want to put my services up on a particular data center owned by Oracle. I want to keep it in-house, but I need to have the flexibility. And that's what we call it as cloud at custom. So where an Oracle ships you a machine that they maintain, that they run the cloud stack, provisioning stack on top of it, and then that cloud at customer machine is assigned specifically for only get paid for the services or the number of services you spin on that machine. They maintain it, but you still have to pay for your energy cost, your rack space cost, etc. Okay, so keep it just in case. All right. Now, we should also ask, for some of the typical questions have been, we went as why we look at Oracle or anything to a cloud. We should know what's the primary objective to adopt a cloud strategy, right? Why are we doing this? Are we looking at costing? Are we looking at ease of management? Are we looking at increasing security? Are we fast project timeline to deliver a new version of EBS to the users? Or I might want to have to understand the new features of the product. So that could be some of your reasons for looking at cloud. The second question you should always ask is, how is it going to impact my bottom line? Will I be able to do it? Right? Is it a speedy delivery of an environment, or is it a saving? If I'm going to do both, that meaning I've hit a jackpot. And choose the environment that has the least impact. So meaning choose an Oracle or a cloud environment that is going to give us the least impact to my one, business process, two, support, three, the agility, right? It should not impact your day-to-day work, so you're looking at a cloud strategy. And sometimes a customer might come back, or if you are a customer, you might think, I don't have a good DR platform for my environment. As part of my audit, I need to have a disaster recovery. So the simpler option there is move your DR first. You can run your backups of your DR database. So you're offsetting the backup for longer retention, and you're reducing the stress you're on your on-prem backup. But now I have a DR. Now using DR environment, if I want to spin up another test environment for a period of say 3 months, 6 months, I don't have to rely on my on-prem resources by creating a virtual machine. I could just spin up a services, keep it running for 3 months. Once I'm done with the project, get rid of it. Right? Then moving to a cloud can get you some in a tricky situation, like in a so add take benefit of some of the cloud services, like my database. Every database in Oracle clouds is encrypted. The keys are managed by an Oracle wallet, right? You also have something called a WAF. I'm assuming most of you guys would use a WAF or a web gate or some kind of a man in the middle between your end user and your EBS application here, right? So these are services that are available, and I can pretty much adopt these services quickly, and then I could say to my info, say my EBS environment is now secure. And I always say, have a clear plan. Right? If you guys are, some customers are using something Oracle application testing suite that is part of your OEM, right? I would pretty much do that so that you could do a complete replay of your workload, either in sequence or in parallel, just to get that brownie point, like saying, if I go to cloud, none of my existing services or processes is going to get impacted. Right? And think it in this fashion. You are running the same EBS application. You're running on the same underlying core technology like Oracle database, right? But you are renting the hardware from someone who's going to be managing it for you, along with patching, along with backups, get some of operational. But I'm only paying for the time that I'm using, not for the whole duration. Especially for your non-production environments, you can always shut down your environments, have a monitoring scripts to such that it can shut down your database, shut down your application service. So you don't pay for those compute during off hours. So you can pretty much reduce your bill. And you could, when I say reducing your bill, when you're moving away from a capex model to an opex model, these are some of the challenges that the customer fail to look at. Right? Why should I have my test environment up and running 24/7 when my critical test team is going to be working, say, Eastern Standard Time? So you can have some scripts automated, can go into these cloud services, so you don't have to have a hefty bill. Right? Always say this, I emphasize on this point, have a clear-cut entry-exit criteria for your EBS application when you're moving to a cloud. When I say an exit criteria, that it should meet, say, my security requirements, it should meet my critical testing requirements, clearly define them and do it. Now, you don't want to say that as part of my upgrade, I want to introduce or subscribe to a new feature of the product, right? That should not be considered as an exit criteria, because that again is going to raise additional challenges for you. So keep it simple, make it over cumbersome, right? Have a clear vision in your mind as what your objective is going to be, right? Keep, okay, if I go to cloud, how do I want how secure should my environment be, try to understand my downstream, upstream impacts, and have a good plan. That is the beginning phase of it. Okay. Any questions? I'm going to pause for 5 minutes before I talk about the next. So, any questions? Or put it up in the chat window. So I'm going to continue. Right. Sorry. Okay. All right. So here we go. So now, how does the authentication and authorization happens on the cloud, right? So hopefully this picture is quite clear for you. Let me break it down quite simple. The box on the right hand side, the outermost perimeter, is what is a cloud provider's network, right? And inside that you have the next black box inside that is called an availability domain. We all know in the cloud, every cloud provider in a particular region has got multiple availability domains. Now, inside an availability domain is where you spin up your core services. When I say core services, that could be a network service, that could be your based access control list, right? Those are your core services. Sorry, question from Malik. Okay. All right. Then in your cloud services, you're going to be spinning up your database tier. You're going to be spinning up your application tier. You might have some, block storage attached to your application tiers. You might subscribe for load balancers. Right. These are called as individual services that you spin up inside a core service like network. Right. So that's what you're seeing on the right side.
Ranga,
Yes.
there was a question that came in, maybe you didn't see it or not, but the question is, can you be in a public cloud and use your internal data?
Yes, you can do it, right? When you internal backup tool set, like if you're using something like, let's say a HP Omni backup tool, right? Or if you're saying you're using some of the most modern cloud backups that are available, right? Yes, you can use that also. It doesn't change uh, the way in the way, but like if you're using something like on-prem, like Commvault on-prem, to a cloud service and you can back up your uh, services up on it, right? But for most of these backup tool set, you're going to have a destination where your backup image is going to be, right? And think about it, if your database is sitting on the cloud and if you're using your backup tool, if your destination is on-prem, then all the data from the cloud needs to come through the internet and then come to your on-prem system. So you want to keep it separate. You can always use the same tool and configure another destination for your services, and that destination could be a cloud storage. Yes, you can do that. And likewise, you can use that second destination to offset backups from on-prem as well. So you're doing it separately. Okay. All right. So let's go this. So we spoke about the core services that you spin up inside availability domain, right? And you start to then define some users. So I've got my users, right? And every user will be associated with a group, and every group have multiple policies, which are nothing but the access control policies to say if a user belongs to a specific database group, then he or she has got access to the database on port 1521 as well as on port 22 for SSH access. If that is an application user, right, then access as an SSH, but can have access just to on the listener port. So you can define some policies and put them into a group and then you associate. So these are again part of the core service as well. The second thing you typically start looking into it is how are the users like the services, like your database service or your application service, when it tries to a backup device which is sitting in the cloud, okay, that backup destination is pretty much highly available, and you have just given it a URL, okay? But that backup, you want to say that I don't want my backup pieces to go out of one region, go through the internet, go to or another AD and store and be copied there. You can use services like this gateway, which gives you the option to piggyback on the private network pipe between these two availability domains. So you can go through that and you don't pay any money and you don't get charged money for that as well, right? And likewise, if service inside your region wants to access, say, Yum repository, or you want to hook it up to my Oracle support, these are all trusted uh, services, but you want to control the access for them, then you use something like a NAT gateway. So that free services that is there. Most cloud providers have it. Oracle have started provisioning, giving options in the last 24 to 18 months time frame, and they're adding as we speak more and more services. Okay. Okay. Now in this diagram, you could see I've got compartments. What compartments I mean is they are all grouping of resources based on the nature. I've got a compartment which is red in which has got a red boundary, a light blue boundary for my application tiers, and a dark blue boundary which is going to be exposed to the internet. Okay? So assume that I create a database. I wanted to have a private IP only. No user from either or from the cloud should be able to speak to my database. So it's going to be a private one. Likewise, for my application tiers, it is going to be private. But how do I expose the URL to the outside world? Good. Okay. So then you start introducing components like load balancers, which will help you to mask your endpoint URL and expose a different URL set so that from the outside they could just come through via the load balancer. And especially if you have multiple application tiers, you could have cookie based traffic balancing option, or you can use round robin, or you could have your own method of saying, for example, I expenses or I supplier is always only one of my application, not by all of them. So URI based routing also possible. So you got those different options. So now I have said everything on my application tier and my database tier, it's all private. So now how do users get authenticated now? First thing, when the users come in, the users access use security password, username, password, if you have enabled multi-factor authentication, gets taken care by Oracle's out-of-the-box solution called IDCS, Identity Cloud Service, right? Oracle's Identity Cloud Service, authentication of users, and you can connect that IDCS with AD, so thereby you don't have to set and define all of these users. So that's the first authentic. Second thought, thinking about authorization, is who can access these services based on the access control list that you define, and you're also going to adopt this concept of outside in architecture. That is, I'm not going to trust anybody. So what I do is in my DMZ region, I'll create a jump box or a bastion station, and I'm going to allow only that bastion station to connect to my database tier. So every user will automate the service, like a terminal window or a RDP session running in zone, and they access my core service. Now that is for admins. Now how about users? How is my URL being protected? Now comes the wonderful concept of web application firewall. What does it do? It controls the access. It provides us a mechanism for intelligent bots that keeps trying based on, like, say, a standard port with a standard username, and it keeps trying different passwords till it gets a crack through. It can block those IPs immediately, right? And you can also use it as a firewall to control, like, which protocol can come in 443, 480 for certain type of services, right? It offers that at a subscription price, right? So these are some of the things that are available for both from authentication perspective as well as from authorizing users accessing your EBS environment. Okay, let's go to the next one. We all know what an ECC and DCC authentication model, right? If you guys are not clear about it, right? ECC and DCC are, it's like in decoupled or decentralized credential checks, right, versus embedded credential check. That's the basic thing. It means is, simple example, if you're using something like your, say, a gateway on the DMZ tier, and you have your application, and your application service will as a mid tier, right? So if you look into this box, let's say you are running your DMZ tier, that needs to speak to your application tier. And between these two, since I don't trust this fellow, or there is no trust between these two fellow, I'm creating groups and policies or software-based firewall rules. That is what is depicted in this particular picture. So if you are using embedded credential check, so from the browser, when you are hitting a URL, right, it is going to redirect your Oracle OEM server for authentication of user ID and password. Once it's verified by the OEM, it redirects the traffic back to your DMZ layer, and the traffic goes through your application server straight away. Whereas in the DCC model, so when the user access that particular URL, what it does is it's going to redirect him to another server. So the aim is to protect these URLs, basically Acme or Globex application. You want to protect them, right? So it's going to redirect it to another server. So as far as the OEM server, it is not the user. As far as the OEMs, it is not this specific user or the server requesting. It does not know. All he knows is there is going to be a single sign-on request for a user ID password. So once he gets authenticated, when the traffic goes back, it just then gets rerouted to the original request server, and then the user is allowed to access the application. So some of the setups in which you can use to protect your EBS endpoint URL, especially in the outside-in architecture. You don't want to trust anybody. You don't want to have your application service directly speaking to your end user without going through a layer of abstraction. Okay? Keep in mind, these are all some of the options that are available for you EBS in OCI or in any cloud provider. It is not a matter of moving my application. It is not a matter of moving your database tier. And we are responsible for the EBS environment, not only from availability, it is also from having it secured. Okay, so this is another a method of, especially when you are running port 443, right? Enabled EBS tier on-prem. If I'm moving it to the cloud, right? How do I use some of the web application firewalls and Oracle WebGate products to act and protect your end applications? Right. So I will share the screen with you. It is very, very much self-explanatory. It is not rocket science. If I can do it, anybody can read and understand. Okay. Any questions here?
Ranga, this is Anatoly. If we have Oracle Access Manager on-prem along with EBS and we move EBS to the cloud, do we need to install a new Oracle Access Manager in the cloud?
Not necessary. You can use your on-prem one, right? At the end, the day, keep in mind when your traffic between the cloud provider and on-prem, right? It depends upon what kind of connection you have it with the cloud. If you have a say a fast connect with say 500, 400 megabits throughput, then as long as that access and that authentication happens in a few seconds, you're good to go, right? So yes, to answer your question, Anatoly, yes, you can use your on-prem one, not a problem.
Thank you.
Now, where it can help and how do we do it, right? We are an EBS company. It's in our DNA. We are entering, probably have completed 22 years of helping customers to adopt EBS, migrate, upgrade, right? EBS from say version 8 to version 3, help them in migrating from on-prem to cloud or just have DR. So we've got enough like an application administrators from functional aspect as well as from a core tech aspect who can help you and understand the whole, guide you through the entire process. We have an homegrown tool called Athena that we run against a customer metadata information to pull, okay, find these are all the customization that are there, and we can then study the impact of upgrade process. Now, some of the capabilities of the tool Athena is what we saw in the 12.2 migration tools that Oracle now provides. We have been nominated by Oracle and awarded during multiple open worlds as the technology partner of the year, right? So partner, one of the very few partners in North America, which has got a license of being an MSP partner. So when I say an MSP, we can do help you in terms of these services, take care of your billing, and probably if you want, we can also manage your environment as your L1, L2 support. Okay, we rely heavily on standards and automation. In the sense, we follow a very strict process about how do we start. We have a standard run book for every EBS customer migration and upgrade, right? The contents of that or the highlights of this is a specific standard. We continuously keep improving that particular run book as we unearth problems or a specific niche case problems. And when I say automation, when I showed services like your tenancy, your regions, your spinning up of your machines, we don't sit and do it manually. We are using command line tools from Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, CLI. And sometimes we also use things like if you guys are clear with DevOps tooling like Terraform and Ansible, we use that wherever the customer feels it. And we give you the code so that you can spin your environment anytime you want after the engagement, right? We emphasize every migration or an upgrade of an EBS environment is a joint effort, right? In the sense, the directions that you give us, approach that we take as we take is a team effort, so that every member in this whole project or part of this particular understands their roles and responsibilities. We make it very clear. And we give the option of saying, okay, here we go, your project manager can run with it, or if you want to give that benefit to us, we will be happy to run with the project as well. Right? And the whole idea of having a collaborative effort is to get you guys comfortable with the whole migration as well as an upgrade or even a cloud strategy. And it's a new journey, and we have to take a step-by-step approach, not say that, okay, I can do it in 2 weeks. No, we don't do that. Understand where we are right now, what is the expectations, right? How do we approach, what services are available, and then we come out with a decent. We wear every consultant inside Central. We wear multiple hats. I can talk to you on EBS, and I can talk to you on database, I can talk on engineered systems. If you're running EBS on Exadata with Exalogic, we could talk about cloud, we could talk about containers, Kubernetes, you name it, right? So we can sit and do all of those things for you. So it makes your you're coming to a group of resources who are well versed in these technologies and will be able to take some of the questions that you might have into like what if, what else of your mind. We also offer hosting services. Some people might say, I don't want to do a public cloud, but I want to make use of this. Can you do it for us? So we have multiple data centers in Michigan, right? We can all host some of your environments for you there and take away the headaches of managing it, checking, monitoring it, doing your operational stuff. We can do that as well. Our first customer, 22 American Axle, is still a customer with us. We tried to have that deep technology partnership with those companies. We are considered as, we always try to achieve the trusted advisor role with the customer. And how do we do it? As part of step 5 or step 6, where we take, it's a journey, it's a collaboration. You are part of the end solution so that you are not surprised when we say, we have done the project, off you go, here's the documentation. So you understand it. And the guys, I'm Harold, and a couple of other sales guys in Central, right? We negotiate hard with Oracle licensing guys, right? We try to get the best value for your investment. If it is necessary, we will make it very clear. I know, I understand pretty much every day we get bombarded by the Oracle sales team to say, why haven't you tried this product? Here's the licensing cost of this. You might think it is necessary, but the product features and limitations are not explained. In that case, we'll be happy to come and talk to you guys, right? And negotiate hard on your behalf and try to see where we could save your money. Because at the end of the day, it's all about saving dollars and cents. Where are we? So we pretty much cover the US, right? We've got about 160 consultants in the US region. So have an office in India, Hyderabad, where we have off-site support. So we offer 24/7, 365 support. Right? And they also, we have functional guys and the technical guys here, the both locations, both in the US as in India, right? And we also, most recently, we opened up an office in the Europe region as well, right? So you have a clear transition. We take assigned a service person, contact person if you are doing managed services, for perspective. If you have a workforce that is spread across the globe, they can work throughout the clock and reduce the time with it. The guy on the left with the big smile on his face, that's the guy who spoke. His name is Harold Harpen. And I am the guy who's got a very serious face, not happy with things. Thank you, gentlemen. That's it from me. Right, please, if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Thank you, Ranga.
Mary, why don't you take it from here, and why don't you announce who is the lucky recipient of the Oculus?
Perfect. Well, thank you, Harold, and thank you, Ranga, again. Martin Leopold with Temple Health is the winner of the Oculus Quest. Ooh. So, Martin, I will contact you via email and get your address, and we will get that out to you. So congratulations. Thank you all for joining us. I hope that you found this very informative. Any messages that we have on chat, we'll certainly respond to one-on-one. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Y'all have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.